preservation and accumulation of infinitesimally small inherited modifications, each profitable to the preserved being. This suggests a real complication, because scientists are frequently saying, well, A needs to become D, but it goes through a process where B and C are involved, and it develops into what we know to be a cell or whatever. But in fact, as Darwin has suggested, natural selection requires the preservation and accumulation of these infinitesimally small inherited modifications, and modifications meaning things that are affected by mutation and so forth. And these have to work in harmony with each other and be preserved in order. So we add more and more to the complexity of the probability.
Right. Every time you have to add an element and preserve those that you already have, the complexity, it multiplies.
It's like the coin flip illustration you were mentioning.
Right, and we'll get back to that in a little bit. So what we're saying is that this whole process is admittedly very, very complex no matter how you look at it. Bob, and explain what Darwin's black box was, because we're going to be referring to this black box thing. What is Darwin's black box?
It's interesting that you select that point. There is a book written by a biochemist named Michael J. Behe, who has been at the center of this whole issue in Pennsylvania, his thoughts on intelligent design. And he wrote a book entitled Darwin's Black Box, which really presents a very interesting case. But Darwin, in his day, knew that there were things about the human cell and other things in life that he could not explain because he could not see them. It was as if it was locked up in a black box that he could not investigate. Behe's point is that in the last 40, 50 years, we've opened up this black box. We can see what's happening inside the black box because we can observe the biochemical reactions. And we can observe that they are irreducibly complex.
Okay, so what we're saying then, and one of the points that we want to begin to unfold here is it's real simple, actually. It's a very complex subject, but very simple. Darwin, back in the 1840s and 50s, had a theory on how the species came about. And his theory was through natural selection and through chaos, essentially. And he said, he referred to things that he could not see and did not understand as those things in this black box. In the last 150 years, through advances in science, not religion now, advances in science, the black box has been opened, and the things that he assumed were and assumed had certain properties have now been able to be clearly examined. And what has come out of that examination is a phrase that you just brought up. You called it irreducible complexity. Okay, now what's sometimes when I talk to my wife about issues, they become irreducibly complex. Do you ever notice that? Sometimes you get in a situation and you're dealing with that. It's so complex, you just can't get past that complexity. It's the way a woman thinks versus the way a man thinks. But that's a different subject. I wonder if that's natural selection. But I digress. Bob, what is irreducible complexity? He's looking at me like, what are you doing? This is normal, brother.
Michael Behe's choice of explaining irreducible complexity comes right back to the simplicity of things folks might find around their house, and certainly most of us have seen, and that is a simple, plain, old-fashioned mousetrap. Okay. And by the way, the new fancier ones are not as effective sometimes as the old plain one. But a mousetrap is basically made of several parts. It has a platform, it has spring, it has levers, it has staples to hold things in place. If you remove any one of these particular parts, the platform, the spring, the lever, all the things, the thing that holds the cheese or whatever, the peanut butter, you don't have a mousetrap that's going to do anything. You have a bunch of parts. And Michael Behe said that there are things in the human cell or things in bacteria that are irreducibly complex. They cannot function without each other.
Now before you go any further, though, let me just make sure we understand this idea of what irreducible complexity is. So you're saying, using the example of a mousetrap, which is something tangible and everybody can visualize, and we're talking the old-fashioned kind with the spring, that goes snap. What we're saying is that if you take any one of those parts away, the mousetrap is just a bunch of stuff that doesn't do anything. It has no function. So in using that as an analogy, we're saying that a mousetrap could not have evolved from something lesser because it had to have all of the parts as they are. That's what we're getting to.
That's quite clear, and they cannot just be any old spring. They cannot be any old piece of wood. It could be any old piece of wood, but they cannot be put together in a random fashion. They have to be put together in a way that they will interact with each other and effectively do something.
So not only do those, and why are we talking about a mousetrap? Because it's going to make what we're about to talk about hopefully much more understandable. So you could go into your garage, and I was reading in one of Michael Behe's, the guy's brilliant, I think, in terms of biology. You can go into your garage and you could find a spring, and you could find a lever, and you could find a piece of wood, but that's not necessarily going to make a mousetrap. The parts not only have to be what they are described to be, but they have to be formed in such a way to be able to work together to accomplish their mission of catching a mouse. So irreducible complexity says that not only do you have to have the right elements, but they have to be put together in such a way as to produce something positive. And you can't evolve a mousetrap by having 2 or 3 of the parts, because it would go against the theory of evolution, which says that if the process is not bringing something to it to make it more valuable, then it's not working.
You know, around my house, Rick, if the spring was found for that mousetrap, and I was looking for the board and the lever, my wife might conclude, speaking of interactions in families, that I'm a collector, and the spring is going out the door. And now I've got my spring, but I thought I had it, and it's gone now. Well, this is what happens in science and biology, too.
Okay.
There are parts. So let's say a protein did come together. Will it be there when it's needed to join with some other factor? And who's going to organize it, or how did it get organized accidentally, so to speak?
Well, and it would have to be organized accidentally, which seems to me a contradiction of terms.
Well, it certainly isn't looking for it intelligently.
Well, it can't be, according to the theory.
Yeah.
All right, now, knowing this idea, this concept of irreducible complexity, wow, it's already time for another break. That's pretty fast. Okay, Fred, let's do the break at this point. Folks, we're running into an irreducibly complex situation because we're going to run out of time, and this is too fascinating a subject. We're talking about intelligent design and how it fits with science.
This is Jonathan and Rick with Christian Questions with special guest Bob Gray on News Talk 102.3 FM WXLM. Stay with us. Welcome back to Christian Questions on News Talk 102.3 FM WXLM. Our subject this segment, is it intelligent design or evolution? To be a part of our program, call 860-442-6102. That's 442-6102.
And, folks, we are talking about the idea of what intelligent design is and how it actually fits scientifically very, very, very clearly, in my opinion anyway. And as we unfold the subject, there's a number of things we want to get into. We're going to look at this